Hello everyone, welcome to Daily Storyteller, and today I'm here to help you sleep. So before we begin, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments where you're from and what time you're watching. Lay back comfortably, relax, and let's begin. Part 1. It was the summer of 2016, the kind of summer where the air was heavy with warmth and the days seemed to stretch endlessly. Three friends, Emma, a photographer with a love for nature, Mark, a quiet but observant history teacher, and Lucas, an extroverted freelance writer, decided to escape the chaos of the city for a weekend. They booked a remote cabin in the dense woods of Oregon, far from the noise and distractions of their daily lives. The drive took hours, winding through roads that grew narrower and more secluded with each passing mile. Lucas drove, his cheerful chatter filling the silence. Mark sat in the back, flipping through an old book about local legends. Emma in the passenger seat scrolled through her phone, looking for hiking trails near the cabin. "Look at this," Mark said, holding up his book. "The locals believe these woods are haunted. People talk about strange disappearances, whispers at night, and unmarked graves." Lucas chuckled. "Classic ghost story. Perfect for a weekend getaway." Emma rolled her eyes but felt a shiver creep up her spine. "Let's just focus on relaxing, okay? No creepy tales tonight." The GPS signal cut out as they neared their destination, replaced by towering trees that formed a canopy over the road. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of red and gold. When they arrived, the cabin stood solitary, its wooden frame blending into the surrounding forest. "This place is perfect," Emma said, snapping a photo of the rustic exterior. Little did they know, their weekend of solitude would soon turn into a night of terror. Inside, the cabin was cozy, but eerily quiet. The furniture was old, yet sturdy, and the walls were adorned with faded photographs of people who seemed to be watching. A fireplace dominated the living room, with a stack of firewood neatly piled beside it. Lucas lit a fire while Emma explored the rooms. "Guys, there's only 2 bedrooms," she called out. "Who's sharing?" "I'll take the couch," Mark replied, setting his book on a table. "It's just 2 nights." As they unpacked, Emma noticed something odd. A dusty journal tucked under the couch. The leather cover was cracked and the pages inside were yellowed. She flipped it open to find scribbled entries. "July 12th, 1983. The whispers started again. I can't sleep. Something watches me from the trees." "Hey, look at this," Emma said, showing the journal to the others. Lucas shrugged. "Probably some kid trying to scare themselves. Ignore it." But Mark's expression darkened. "Or it's a warning," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. That night they cooked dinner, laughed, and played cards. The tension from the journal faded until the first sound came. It was a soft knock, faint but deliberate, on the window. "Did you hear that?" Emma whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackling fire. "Probably an animal," Lucas said, brushing it off. But when Mark went to the window, there was nothing outside, just darkness and the faint outline of trees swaying in the breeze. The knocking returned, louder this time from the opposite side of the cabin. Mark grabbed a flashlight and stepped out onto the porch. The beam of light cut through the night, revealing nothing. The woods were silent, too silent. Emma pulled Mark back inside. "Let's just lock the doors and stay together," she said, her voice trembling. They bolted the doors and huddled in the living room, the earlier laughter replaced by an uneasy silence. Emma clutched the journal, flipping through more entries. "July 15th. I heard footsteps around the cabin. They stop when I look. I feel it watching me, waiting." A chill ran through the room as the fire sputtered and dimmed. By midnight, the air inside the cabin felt oppressive. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She stood by the window, peering out into the shadows, when she saw it, a figure. It stood motionless at the tree line, its silhouette barely visible in the moonlight. "Guys," she whispered, "there's someone out there." Lucas grabbed a poker from the fireplace. Mark shined the flashlight out the window, but the figure was gone. The knocking returned, louder and more insistent, this time from the back door. They moved as one, creeping toward the sound. Lucas yanked the door open, ready to confront whoever or whatever was there. But the porch was empty. Then they heard the whispering. It came from all around them, faint and indistinct, like a breeze carrying voices. Emma backed away, clutching the journal. "It's in here," she said, her voice shaking. "It's inside." The lights flickered, plunging the cabin into near darkness. Shadows danced across the walls as the fire struggled to stay alive. Mark held the flashlight steady, his eyes scanning the room. We need to leave, now. But the front door wouldn't budge. It was as if something was holding it shut. Lucas swung the poker, aiming at nothing but air, as the whispering grew louder. Emma screamed as a shadow moved across the wall, independent of any light source. The journal slipped from her hands, landing open on the floor. The final entry stared back at her. July 20th. It won't let me leave. If you find this, it's already too late. A deafening crash came from the bedroom. Mark ran to investigate, finding the window shattered and the bed empty. Lucas? Emma cried, but there was no answer. The whispers turned to laughter, cold and mocking. Emma and Mark bolted for the back door. This time it opened, revealing the dark woods. They ran, branches clawing at their clothes and faces. The laughter followed, growing distant but never fading. When they reached the car, the keys were gone. We have to go back, Mark said, his voice firm despite the terror in his eyes. No, Emma whispered. We can't. The cabin loomed in the distance, its windows glowing faintly. The laughter stopped. For a moment all was silent. Then a knock came from the car window. Part 2. It was late August 2018. The kind of summer where the air felt heavy, as if the world was holding its breath. 3 friends, Natalie, Ethan, and Chloe, decided to spend the weekend camping in the secluded Ashwood Forest. It was Ethan's idea, inspired by a desire to escape their buzzing city lives and reconnect with nature. Natalie was the practical one, a project manager who never left her checklist behind. Chloe was the free spirit, always seeking adventure. Ethan was the glue of the group, dependable and optimistic. Together they were the perfect trio. The forest stretched for miles, its trees thick and ancient. They parked the car at the edge of the woods and hiked in, their gear packed tightly. Ethan led the way, using his map app for directions until they lost cell service. This place is incredible, Chloe said, twirling under the canopy of trees. The sun dappled the forest floor, but the deeper they went, the dimmer it became. By late afternoon, they reached a clearing. It was perfect, flat ground surrounded by towering pines and a small stream nearby. They pitched their tents and built a fire as the sun dipped lower. I read that Ashwood Forest is supposed to be haunted, Chloe teased, poking at the fire with a stick. Something about missing hikers and strange lights. Ethan laughed. Every forest has its legends. Let's not scare ourselves on the first night. But Natalie noticed something odd. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. No chirping crickets or rustling leaves, just an eerie, oppressive silence. The first few hours were peaceful. They roasted marshmallows and shared stories under the stars. Chloe played music softly on her speaker, the crackling fire casting shadows that danced around them. Around midnight, Natalie yawned and stretched. I'm calling it a night, she said, retreating to her tent. Ethan and Chloe stayed up a little longer, enjoying the stillness. Suddenly there was a sound, a faint rustling in the trees. Ethan froze, his eyes scanning the dark. Did you hear that? He asked. Chloe shrugged. Probably an animal. Relax. But the rustling grew louder, closer. Ethan grabbed his flashlight and shone it toward the trees. Nothing, just shadows. The sound stopped as abruptly as it started. When they finally went to their tents, Natalie was already fast asleep. But Ethan lay awake, his mind replaying the sound. It wasn't like an animal, it had a rhythm, like footsteps. Around 3 a.m., Natalie woke to a faint sound outside her tent, a low whisper, unintelligible but insistent. Her heart raced as she strained to listen, then it stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before. Morning came, but the unease lingered. They tried to brush it off as first-night jitters. After breakfast, they decided to explore the forest. Let's follow the stream, Ethan suggested. It'll be fun. The stream led them deeper into the woods, where the trees grew thicker and the air felt colder. Chloe found an old carved symbol on a tree, a circle with jagged lines. That's weird, she said, tracing it with her finger. What do you think it means? Natalie didn't answer. She felt watched, though she saw no one. The wind carried a faint whisper, almost like laughter. By late afternoon, they returned to camp. The clearing felt different, as if the forest had shifted slightly. Natalie found strange marks near their tents, deep scratches in the dirt that hadn't been there before. As night fell, the unease turned to fear. The firelight seemed dimmer, and shadows crept closer. Natalie clutched her flashlight tightly, her eyes darting to every sound. Then it happened. A loud snap echoed through the clearing. Ethan shot to his feet, his flashlight beaming into the trees. Who's there? He called. No response. A figure emerged just at the edge of the light. It was tall, its shape human-like but wrong. The shadows clung to it as if it absorbed the darkness. Natalie screamed. Ethan threw a rock toward the figure, but it didn't move. The three friends huddled together, hearts pounding. Then the figure stepped forward. "Run!" Ethan shouted. They bolted into the woods, the beam of their flashlights bouncing wildly. The forest seemed endless, the trees closing in on them. Behind them, the sound of footsteps grew louder. Chloe tripped, crying out as she hit the ground. Ethan pulled her up, urging her to keep moving. Natalie glanced back and saw it, a shadowy figure moving unnaturally fast, its limbs jerking. They reached the stream, panting. "We have to keep going," Ethan said, his voice shaking. But the figure was there, standing across the water. Its face was featureless, its form barely solid. It let out a sound, low and guttural, like a growl. Ethan grabbed a fallen branch and swung it, desperate to protect his friends. But the figure didn't flinch. It stepped closer, its presence suffocating. Natalie's flashlight flickered, then went out. The darkness was complete, broken only by the faint light of the moon. The friends stumbled blindly, their breath ragged. Somehow they made it back to the clearing, but their tents were torn apart. "Get to the car," Ethan shouted. They ran, not stopping until they reached the edge of the forest. The car was there, but the tires were slashed. Desperation set in. They piled into the car, locking the doors. Ethan tried the engine, but it wouldn't start. The forest was silent again, but the figure stood just beyond the trees, watching. Then the whispers returned. They came from every direction, growing louder. Natalie covered her ears, but it didn't help. The sun began to rise, and the figure slowly faded with the light. The whispers stopped. When they finally left, they didn't speak. The forest felt like a bad dream, but the scratches on their car were very real. To this day, none of them talk about what happened in Ashwood Forest, but they all agree on one thing: they'll never go camping again. In part 3. It was October 2019, and the air carried the crisp chill of autumn. A group of 4 co-workers, Ryan, Claire, Devin, and Mia, had just finished a late shift at their marketing agency. Instead of heading home, Ryan suggested something different, exploring the abandoned warehouse 2 blocks away. "Come on," he said with a mischievous grin. "It's almost Halloween. Let's do something spooky." Claire, the skeptic, rolled her eyes. "That place is condemned. Why would we go there?" Devin, always the thrill seeker, smirked. "Because it's fun, unless you're scared." Mia hesitated, clutching her jacket tighter. She wasn't one for scary adventures, but she didn't want to be the odd one out. The warehouse loomed in the distance, its silhouette jagged against the cloudy sky. Once a bustling factory, it had been abandoned for decades after a fire gutted its interior. The locals whispered about strange happenings there, voices echoing in the night, shadows moving where no light could cast them. As they stood at the rusted gate, Ryan pulled out a flashlight. "Last chance to back out," he teased. No one moved. The gate creaked open, the sound echoing into the silent street. They stepped inside, unaware of what awaited them in the darkness, and so the dare began. The air inside the warehouse was damp and stale, carrying the scent of decay. Their footsteps echoed loudly as they moved across the cracked concrete floor. Rows of rusted machinery and piles of debris filled the vast space, casting eerie shadows under the beam of Ryan's flashlight. Mia stayed close to Claire, her eyes darting nervously. "This place feels wrong," she whispered. "Relax," Devin said, his voice bouncing off the walls. "It's just an old building." But even Ryan, the ringleader, felt a knot of unease. Something about the silence was unnatural. There were no rats scurrying, no wind whistling through broken windows, just a heavy, oppressive stillness. Then they heard it, a faint clattering, like metal against metal. Claire froze. "What was that?" "Probably just debris falling," Ryan said, though his voice lacked conviction. He shone his flashlight toward the noise but saw nothing. They ventured deeper into the building, the sound of their breathing growing louder. As they turned a corner, they found a door slightly ajar. "Let's check it out," Devin said, pushing it open. Inside was a smaller room filled with dusty shelves and scattered papers. On the far wall, words were scrawled in red paint, "Get out while you can." Mia gasped. "Okay, this is officially not fun anymore." "Someone probably wrote that years ago," Ryan said, but his grip on the flashlight tightened. The clattering sound returned, louder this time. Something was moving in the dark. Devin moved toward the back of the room, his curiosity overriding common sense. "Look at this," he said, picking up an old ledger. The pages were brittle, but the words were legible. "Employee Incident Report. Fatality, October 12, 1981. "What happened here?" Claire asked, peering over his shoulder. "Fire," Ryan said. I read about it. A worker died in an accident. They say his body was never found. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Mia rubbed her arms, glancing toward the door. I don't think we should be here. Devin ignored her, flipping through the ledger. There's more, he muttered. Reports of strange noises, workers quitting. His sentence was cut short by a loud bang. The door they entered through slammed shut. Mia screamed and Ryan yanked the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It stuck. Then the lights flickered. Dim, pale lights that shouldn't have been working in an abandoned building. Shadows danced on the walls, but they weren't from the group. Look, Claire cried, pointing. A shadow moved across the far wall, tall and unnatural. Devin dropped the ledger. We need to get out, now. The group bolted out of the room, their panic fueling their speed. The warehouse felt like a maze, its corridors twisting and turning endlessly. The clattering sound followed them, now joined by faint whispers. Who's there? Ryan yelled, spinning around with his flashlight. The beam caught something, a figure at the end of the hallway. It was tall, its face obscured by shadow, and it didn't move. Run! Claire screamed, pulling Mia along. They sprinted down the hall, but the figure was always there, just out of reach yet never falling behind. The whispers grew louder, filling their ears like a sinister chant. They burst into another room, slamming the door behind them. The whispers stopped, leaving only their ragged breathing. What was that? Mia sobbed, tears streaming down her face. I don't know, Ryan said, leaning against the wall, but it's not human. Devin's flashlight flickered, and then everything went dark. A cold hand brushed Mia's shoulder. She screamed. When the lights came back on, Mia was gone. Where is she? Claire shouted, her voice breaking. They searched frantically, but there was no sign of her. The figure reappeared, standing in the doorway. Its shadow stretched toward them, long and unnatural. Go! Ryan yelled, dragging Claire toward another exit. They stumbled into the main hall, the faint glow of the streetlights visible through the broken windows. The gate was in sight. Freedom was just a few steps away, but as they reached the street, Ryan stopped. Wait, he said, where's Devin? Claire turned, but the warehouse was silent. No whispers, no clattering, just the empty, yawning darkness. The two of them ran, not stopping until they reached their car. They never spoke about what happened, not to each other, not to anyone. Weeks later, Claire drove past the warehouse. A condemned sign hung on the gate, swaying in the breeze. She thought she saw someone standing in the window, a tall figure watching, but when she blinked, it was gone.